Here is the problem with the leg extension.
If you get lucky, you might get 90 to 110 degrees of knee flexion here.
You're capable of around 140 to 150 degrees of knee flexion. So you're missing out on 40 to maybe 50 degrees of knee flexion range of motion that could provide more quad stretch and therefore probably grow more muscle.
Additionally, you get around 90 to 100 degrees of hip flexion,
which, once again, misses out on a bunch of stretch for your rectus femoris.
And yeah, you can adjust the back seat to be a bit further back. But oftentimes, this will also reduce how much range of motion you're able to get at the knee.
And finally, most leg extension machines are hardest in the peak contraction. This is likely the opposite of what we want. We want more resistance in the stretch and less in the contraction. Don't believe me? Well, we have 2 studies on the effect of resistance profile on hypertrophy, one by Zabaleta-Corda and colleagues and one by Nunes and colleagues. In the study by Zabaleta-Corda and colleagues, we observed more hypertrophy in the exercise that places more tension in the stretch position, the preacher curl compared to the incline curl. In a study by Nunes and colleagues, we observed similar hypertrophy between a cable preacher curl and a barbell preacher curl. Overall, though, the evidence either shows similar or greater hypertrophy when placing more tension in the stretch position. And therefore, in all 3 of these ways, the leg extension is suboptimal. Why do I focus so much on the stretch when it comes to training the quads? Well, what you might not know is that most studies on the stretch are actually performed in the quads, and they almost always find more growth when training in the stretch position compared to the shortened position. For example, one study by Pedrosa and colleagues compared full range of motion leg extensions from 100 degrees of knee flexion to 30 degrees of knee flexion, to doing lengthened partials, to doing shortened partials. And finally, the 4th group performed a combination of shortened partials and lengthened partials. At pretty much all sites, the group performing lengthened partials, focusing more on the stretch, observed more quad hypertrophy. Likewise, when it comes to the leg extension and hip angle, I was recently involved in a pre-printed study by Larson and colleagues, where we compared 40 degrees of hip flexion in a leg extension to 90 degrees of hip flexion in a leg extension. With 40 degrees of hip flexion, we lengthen or stretch the rectus femoris more, since the rectus femoris is also a hip flexor. And when comparing the 40-degree condition to the 90-degree condition, we saw somewhere between 50% more growth to 170% more growth in the rectus femoris when training in a more stretched position than the traditional leg extension would do. And these aren't the only studies. There are many other studies on the quads out there finding greater hypertrophy when focusing on the stretch. For all these reasons, focusing on the stretch is a good thing for the quads. What makes the Sissy squat more effective than the leg extension? Well, the Sissy squat trains all 4 heads of the quadriceps in the stretch position, even the rectus femoris, by allowing for full knee flexion of around 140 to 150 degrees and allowing for full hip extension. We're stretching all 4 heads maximally. Other benefits of the Sissy squat include that anyone can do them to some extent with some modifications, they don't require equipment, and they become more effective as you become more trained potentially. But I hear you saying, Dr. Milo, I never want to think about exercise selection again. MyoAdapt has you covered. It ranks exercises for you based on how effective they are at building muscle, based on the equipment you have available. How exercises are ranked is constantly being updated in light of new scientific research, for instance comparing 2 different exercises. So you'll always be at the cutting edge of exercise science for building muscle. MyoAdapt is being released in just a few months. So if you want to be notified when it gets released, go to myoadapt.com and put in your email. By signing up when it launches, you'll be able to lock in a lifetime discount on how much you pay. Because of all the research on the stretched position being beneficial for hypertrophy, that is one aspect of technique we essentially never want to miss out on. What does good technique look like? Well, according to a narrative review by Androulakis Kourakakis and colleagues, there's a few things to look out for. First, tempo. We want each rep to last around 2 to 8 seconds, with a more controlled eccentric and an explosive concentric phase. Use a technique that maximizes the stimulus on the quads while minimizing involvement of non-target muscle groups. And finally, focus on the stretch. Make sure you go as deep as you can. One additional Sissy squat specific component of technique, in my view, is to not use the Sissy squat machine.
Why not? Well, for one, it forces you into some hip flexion, shortening the rectus femoris. Secondly, it also doesn't allow you to get a full stretch on your quads when it comes to getting full knee flexion. This right here gets in the way. So avoid the machine.
And finally, a lot of people don't have this machine. So just because you don't have the machine, don't think you can't do Sissy squats. This is how to do the Sissy squat.
First, get up on your tippy toes. Then, find something you can hold on to. Doing these inside of a rack where you can hold on with both hands is goated. But one hand is fine as well. Squeeze those glutes, which makes the rectus femoris a bit more stretched. Go down, having your knees come directly forward in front, towards the wall in front of you. Keep your glutes squeezed the whole time, as odd as that sounds. Lean back as you go further down. This will involve your abs a bit more, but it does also make the stretch position more challenging. As far as tempo goes, take at least 2 seconds. 1, 2, all the way down. Pause briefly in the fully stretched position, and do an explosive concentric. Common mistakes. Flexing your hips as you get to the bottom to make it easier. Brother, we want the bottom position to be difficult. Drop a willing style, dungeon slave style. Please, just keep your hips extended. It's the whole point of the exercise. Your torso angle should remain the same throughout the whole lift. It's just moving up.
Another common complaint about these is that they're challenging and that a beginner couldn't possibly do these. First off, that applies to many exercises. Are pull-ups a bad exercise? I don't think so. Secondly, here are 5 levels of sissy squatting from beginner to highly advanced.
First level, keep your torso upright the whole time and just go all the way down to get full knee flexion. Almost anyone should be able to do this. If level 1 was too easy, try leaning back a tiny bit to get a bit more rectus femoris stretch and make it a bit more challenging. And level 3, extend your hips fully, which stretches the rectus femoris more and makes it more challenging. Level 4, arch your back and pause in a fully stretched position. And finally, level 5, add a plate to your chest and do lengthened partials. Congratulations, you've won.
To address a commonly cited issue, progressive overload, most people won't need to load these. They need to improve technique. Sissy squats performed this way are easy, and I would bet that's probably what you're doing. Sissy squats performed that way are not. If you do need to load it, even with great tempo and range of motion, to be honest, sissy squats are probably best done for somewhat higher reps anyways, since most lower body compounds are best suited to 5 to 12 reps. Otherwise, you get so out of breath that you're no longer taking that set close to failure and taking the local muscle close to failure.
All right, hate around. Claim 1, no one's ever built big quads using sissy squats. Here's your first citation. And secondly, that applies to many things. No one had ever built big quads using synthetic testosterone in the early 1900s. Does that mean testosterone also doesn't work?
Claim 2, those look dangerous. Let's dissect this. First, if it's the instability component, just make sure you have something within reach you can hold on to prevent falling over. If instead it's the range of motion or the intense stretch, I would urge you to think about deep squats or even seated leg curls. Are those dangerous? No? By the same standards, sissy squats should be pretty safe too. Also, consider that lifting generally has very low injury rates, especially bodybuilding style training. Get out of the glass house and enter the brick house. And now for your obligatory YouTuber call to action at the end of the video. Please like the video. We're trying to reach 2,000 likes and it would make my day better. Dr. Milo Wolf, long muscle lengths, we out. They said he was done. They said there was no way Dr. Milo Wolf would keep wearing the sweater even in the heat of summer. You was wrong. We out here.